illustration for that picture.
Which one?
The big one.
So that is called Their Last Supper. T-H-E is capitalized, I-R is lowercase. It is a play on the Last Supper. I took my first trip to Brazil in 2021. We went on a tour of a church, and outside of the church was a mural of the Last Supper, but it was Brazilians eating pizza. And that was shortly after George Floyd had been murdered, and the first thing that came to mind was to do the Last Supper with George Floyd in the centerpiece, because he did kick off the huge movement. And as a Black person in America, for me at least, every time someone was murdered by the police, I was like, is this the one? And when I say that, I will say it honestly, is this the one? Like when Philando Castile was murdered, is this the one? But then they found out he had priors or he had this whatever. They would make an excuse. And George was the one they could not make an excuse about, regardless. And so they tried, but there's no excuse that could be made. And so that vision had sat with me. I wanted to do the Last Supper. And then I did do research just to make sure that others hadn't. I didn't want to play on someone else, and they hadn't. And in doing that particular piece, I wanted the world to see them. Because when we are murdered, they try to demonize us, they try to make us seem that we're not who we are. Even when Trayvon, even with Tamir. Tamir was a child, Trayvon was a teenager. Sandra was just doing a lane change. Brianna was asleep, and that was for gentrification to get her building, which came out years later. So I wanted
I'm
to...
sorry, I didn't catch that.
Brianna?
Yeah.
About Brianna? Years later, I don't know if you know recently, those were false warrants.
Right.
It was for gentrification. They wanted the building. They wanted to bring the price values down of the area so that they could buy it up cheap. It had nothing to do with Brianna.
Oh my.
So that being said, that piece is very close to home, and I wanted them to be seen for the beautiful people that they are.
How long did it take you to do all the names? How long did
The names themselves?
Yeah, the names at the top.
Oh, the names were a process. The beams themselves, believe it or not, thank goodness, the gold pin has some type of oil in it that counteracts to the stain. So when I tested it out, if I wrote it with the gold and then stained it, the stain would not go over the gold. The gold comes right back through. So it was just, I would sometimes do a panel at a time. So the names didn't take long. My lovely assistant, Miss Angela, was here Friday night because we did some touch up and she added some more names for me. So the names didn't take long. What took long was, I'm not an architect, trying to figure out to cut the angles and because that is actual wood. That is 1/16 piece of wood. That's layered. And I did stucco the walls and create the windows and all of that. I'm not an architect. But again, it's a replica of the Last Supper. So they're in a room at a dinner table having their Last Supper.
The red represents the blood for all those who have been slain. This painting spoke to me in so many ways. The pictures don't do it justice. Even I am in awe of what poured out of me in bringing this piece to life. Wherever you stand and looking at this piece, they are looking at you. I don't even know how I was able to accomplish that. They did that. In bringing this painting to life, Sandra spoke to me because I actually started the piece on the wrong side. And finally, I was tapped on the shoulder because in trying to sketch George, George was fighting with Brianna, and finally something said, hey, look at the other side of the canvas, because I bought premium canvas and I was sketching on the rough side of the canvas. So in flipping it over, Sandra said, I don't want that picture, the typical profile picture that the media was playing. I want one that's smiling. And in doing that, and she said, I want to be leaning on George. And I was like, I don't have to be so literal. George doesn't have to be like Jesus. And so George morphed into having his arms crossed and Sandra leaning on it. And Brianna was like, I want a different picture. And I want my hair like this. And I want my arm on the table. And I said, well, do you have a selfie of an arm on the table? And she did. And then I was like, well, it'd be kind of cool if somebody was doing the peace fingers. And there's a selfie of Tyree Nichols with the peace fingers. I wanted people to see them for who they were. There are drawstrings for Stefan and Trayvon's hoodies. Eric Gardner's tie is real. Philando has an actual hat on. There are just little details, including the names, which are on actual wood. And the sunrise in the background. It is their Last Supper. It is my hope that we will never forget, and the conversation continues, and that we remember them, say their name, and that no one else has to sit at their Last Supper.